They called her the bastard niece, the shameful secret hidden in plain sight. For 22 years, Mabel scrubbed floors in a mansion where she should have been family, served meals at tables where she should have sat, and remained invisible in halls that echoed with her mother's ghost. Society had decided her worth before she drew her first breath. But society did not account for the Earl of Ravenshire, a man who saw what others refused to see, a man who would risk everything to claim the one woman he could not ignore. What happened next sent shockwaves through every drawing room in England and changed the rules of love forever. Before we enter the world of 1843, subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you are listening from. Your like means this story reaches others who need to hear it. Now step into the cold halls of Whitmore Hall, where impossible love is about to begin. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Whitmore Hall, casting long shadows across the marble floors that Mabel had polished since dawn. Her hands, raw from cold water and harsh soap, moved with practiced efficiency as she scrubbed the entrance hall. The scent of beeswax and lemon oil filled her nostrils, familiar and oppressive. She paused for a moment, straightening her back, and caught her reflection in the gleaming surface of a silver candelabra. Dark hair pulled severely back, grey dress buttoned to her throat, hands that trembled slightly from exhaustion. This was her life. This had always been her life. Mabel, the bastard niece, the shameful secret hidden in plain sight. The sound of heels clicking against stone made her heart sink. She knew that rhythm, that purposeful stride that meant nothing good. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore appeared at the top of the grand staircase, her silk morning gown rustling with each step. Her face, once beautiful, had hardened into perpetual displeasure, every line etched by bitterness and pride. She surveyed the hall with cold eyes, searching for imperfection. Always searching. "Mabel," she said, her voice sharp as winter frost, "the silver needs more attention. Lord Pemberton's wife will be visiting this afternoon, and I will not have her thinking we keep a slovenly house." "Yes, Aunt Eleanor," Mabel replied softly, dropping into a curtsy despite the ache in her knees. "And do not call me aunt in front of guests. It is Mrs. Whitmore to you, always." The words cut as they were meant to. Mabel nodded, keeping her eyes lowered, a skill she had perfected over 22 years of invisible existence. Mrs. Whitmore descended the remaining stairs, her expression softening only when her daughter appeared behind her. Clarissa Whitmore was everything her mother could have wished for. Golden hair arranged in perfect ringlets, porcelain skin unblemished by labor or worry, a dress of pale blue muslin that cost more than Mabel would see in a year. "Mama!" Clarissa called, her voice light and musical. "Have you heard the news? The Countess of Ashford says that the Earl of Ravenshire himself is returning to the countryside. Can you imagine? The most eligible bachelor in all of England, right here in our county." Mrs. Whitmore's eyes gleamed with sudden calculation. Peter Caldwell. The Viscount turned Earl after his brother's tragic death. Wealthy beyond measure, connected to the highest circles and still unmarried at 32. When does he arrive, darling? Within the fortnight, they say. He is settling affairs at his estate near Brighton and will be conducting diplomatic business in the region. Clarissa twirled her skirts, billowing. "Oh, Mama, would it not be wonderful if he came here? To Whitmore Hall?" "He shall," Mrs. Whitmore declared with certainty. "We shall ensure it. Lord Whitmore's connections to the Foreign Office make it perfectly reasonable to extend an invitation for consultation and rest." Mabel continued polishing, her hands moving mechanically while her mind wandered to forbidden places. She had read about the Earl of Ravenshire in the newspapers that lined the kindling basket. A man of principle and intelligence, they said. A diplomat who had brokered peace between warring factions. A scholar who spoke 5 languages. She imagined what it must be like to move through the world with such freedom, such purpose. "Mabel," she startled, nearly dropping the cloth. "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore. You will prepare the blue room for our distinguished guest. Everything must be perfect, absolutely perfect. This is Clarissa's opportunity to secure her future, and I will not have you ruining it with your clumsiness." "I understand. And keep to the servants' quarters when he is here. I do not want him asking awkward questions about your presence." Clarissa giggled, the sound like wind chimes. "Oh, Mama, surely he would not even notice her. Mabel is practically invisible." The words were not meant to be cruel, which somehow made them worse. Clarissa lived in a world where Mabel simply did not exist as a person, only as a function. Someone who cleaned, who served, who disappeared. Mrs. Whitmore nodded with satisfaction. Precisely. And that is how it shall remain. They swept past her, leaving behind the scent of rosewater and ambition. Mabel remained on her knees, cloth in hand, her reflection staring back at her from the polished floor. Invisible. Later that afternoon, Mabel found refuge in the only place she could call her own. The library at Whitmore Hall was rarely used by the family, who found reading tedious and unnecessary. But to Mabel, it was sanctuary. She ran her fingers along the leather spines, feeling the embossed titles. History, philosophy, poetry. Here, between these walls, she could be anyone. She could travel to distant lands, understand complex ideas, feel emotions that had no place in her narrow existence. She pulled down a volume of Wordsworth and settled into the window seat, the late afternoon sun warming her face. The words transported her immediately. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when my life began. So is it now I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old or let me die. Could a heart leap for joy when it had learned to expect only disappointment? Could someone like her dare to hope for more than this half-life of servitude? The sound of the door opening made her jump. She quickly closed the book, preparing to apologize for her presumption. But it was only Mrs. Henderson, the head housekeeper, and the closest thing to a friend that Mabel had ever known. The older woman's face was lined with kindness and hard-earned wisdom. "Reading again, child?" Mabel nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "I know I should not, but I cannot help myself." Mrs. Henderson sat beside her, her joints creaking with age. "Your mother was like that too, always had her nose in a book. Lady Catherine before she, well," the housekeeper trailed off, the unfinished sentence heavy between them. "Mabel's mother. The beautiful daughter of nobility who had loved unwisely and died in disgrace, leaving behind a baby that no one wanted. A reminder of sin and scandal. Mrs. Whitmore only took you in because Lord Whitmore insisted," Mrs. Henderson continued quietly. "Said it was Christian duty, but I think he pitied you in his way." "Pity is better than nothing," Mabel said, though she was not sure she believed it. "You deserve more than pity, dear girl. You deserve to be seen, to be valued." Mrs. Henderson patted her hand. "Mark my words, your day will come." Mabel wanted to believe her, but as she looked out the window at the manicured gardens, the pristine lawns, the world of privilege that would never be hers, she felt only the weight of impossibility. How could anything change when she was invisible? When she was nothing but the bastard niece, the shameful secret, the girl who did not belong? The sun dipped lower, casting the library in amber light. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed 5 times. The household would be preparing for dinner, a meal Mabel would eat alone in the kitchen after everyone else had been served. She returned the book to its shelf, her fingers lingering on the spine. Then she smoothed her dress, checked that her hair remained severely pinned, and prepared to return to her role. Invisible, obedient, forgotten, but deep inside, where no one could see, a small flame of hope refused to die completely. Perhaps Mrs. Henderson was right. Perhaps someday someone would truly see her, not as a burden, not as a shame, but as Mabel. Simply Mabel. A woman with dreams, intelligence, and a heart capable of more love than anyone had ever allowed her to give. The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of preparation. Every room was scrubbed, every surface polished until it gleamed. Fresh flowers appeared in crystal vases. The finest linens were aired and pressed. Mrs. Whitmore supervised everything with obsessive attention, her anxiety manifesting in increasingly impossible demands. Clarissa practiced her piano every afternoon, her fingers stumbling over the keys in her eagerness. She tried on dress after dress, seeking her mother's approval, changing her hair arrangements hourly. And Mabel worked. She worked until her hands bled, until exhaustion made her stumble, until she became even more invisible than before. Just another part of the machinery that made Whitmore Hall function. On the evening before the Earl's expected arrival, Mabel collapsed into her small bed in the servants' quarters, every muscle screaming. Tomorrow, he would arrive. Tomorrow, The house would transform into a stage for Clarissa's performance, and tomorrow Mabel would disappear entirely into the walls where she belonged. She closed her eyes and dreamed of rainbows and poetry, and a world where hearts were allowed to leap. The morning of the Earl's arrival dawned clear and cold, frost clinging to the windows like delicate lace. Mabel had been awake since 4, ensuring every detail was perfect before the household stirred. She moved through the halls like a ghost, efficient and silent. Her grey dress blended into the shadows, her footsteps made no sound. Years of practice had taught her how to be present without being seen. By 8 o'clock, Whitmore Hall hummed with nervous energy. Mrs. Whitmore inspected every room twice, finding fault with arrangements that had been perfect moments before. Clarissa changed her dress 3 times, finally settling on pale rose muslin. Even Lord Whitmore emerged from his study to ensure everything met his standards. He is a man of considerable influence, Lord Whitmore reminded his wife. The Foreign Office values his counsel greatly, and perhaps Mrs. Whitmore replied, smoothing her emerald silk gown. He will see that our Clarissa is equally worthy of his attention. Mabel overheard this while arranging fresh roses in the entrance hall. Something twisted in her chest. Of course they would wish for such a match. Clarissa was beautiful, legitimate, everything a man of title would seek. And Mabel? She was nothing. A shadow that existed only to serve. The sound of carriage wheels on gravel announced the Earl's arrival precisely at noon. The household assembled with military precision. Mabel stood near the back, hands folded, eyes lowered. But when the great doors opened and Peter Caldwell, Earl of Ravenshire, stepped into Whitmore Hall, she could not help but look up. He was not what she expected. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with easy confidence. His dark hair fell in waves that suggested he cared little for fashion. His face was strong, intelligent, with eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He wore a traveling coat of dark blue superfine, immaculately tailored yet somehow unpretentious. But it was his expression that startled her. Where she had expected aristocratic coldness, she saw warmth. Where she had anticipated pride, she saw curiosity. Lord Whitmore, the Earl said, his voice rich and cultured. I am grateful for your hospitality. You are most welcome, my lord. May I present my wife, Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, and our daughter, Miss Clarissa Whitmore. Peter bowed with perfect courtesy. Mrs. Whitmore, Miss Whitmore, your home is lovely. I confess I find the countryside far more appealing than London's endless social obligations. Clarissa curtsied, her cheeks flushing prettily. We are honoured by your presence, my lord. Mrs. Whitmore gestured toward the drawing room. Perhaps you would care for refreshment after your journey. That would be most welcome, Peter agreed, following his hosts. As they disappeared, Mabel returned to the kitchen, her mind still processing what she had seen. The Earl was nothing like she had imagined. There was no hauteur in his bearing, no contempt in his gaze. He had looked at the servants not as furniture, but as people, nodding acknowledgement to Mrs. Henderson. Perhaps he truly was different. The afternoon passed in activity. Mabel helped serve luncheon, careful to remain invisible. She caught fragments of conversation, Peter discussing diplomatic matters, agricultural reform, the local community. He asked questions. He listened. He cared about answers. That evening, after the family retired to the drawing room, Mabel found herself washing fine china in the scullery. The work was mindless, allowing her thoughts to wander. What would it be like to engage in conversation about ideas, to be seen as someone whose thoughts mattered? She shook her head at her foolishness. Such dreams were dangerous. The clock struck 10. Mabel dried her hands and prepared to retreat to her room, but as she passed through the darkened corridor, she heard voices from the library. Curious, she paused. My daughter has been quite eager to make your acquaintance, Lord Whitmore was saying. She is accomplished in all the feminine arts. Her disposition is most agreeable. I am sure Miss Whitmore is everything you say, Peter replied, his tone polite but non-committal. However, I must be frank, sir. I did not come seeking a wife. My purpose here is diplomatic consultation and respite from London's social season. There was a pause. Of course, my lord. Though a man of your position might find advantage in securing his legacy. Perhaps, Peter said quietly. But I have learned that matters of the heart cannot be forced by advantage or convenience. When I marry, if I marry, it will be to a woman who engages my mind and soul, as well as meets society's expectations. Mabel's breath caught. A woman who engages my mind and soul. Such words seem to belong to poetry, not to aristocratic marriage arrangements. She moved away quickly, not wanting to be caught. But Peter's words followed her up the narrow servants' stairs and into her small, cold room. That night sleep came slowly. Mabel lay in her narrow bed, thinking about the Earl who spoke of the heart when discussing marriage. And she allowed herself just for a moment to imagine what it might be like to be truly seen by someone like him. Not as a servant, not as a shame, but as a person of value. It was a dangerous thought, a foolish thought. But in the darkness, with no one to judge her, Mabel held it close like a secret treasure. The next morning brought rain, a steady downpour that confined the household indoors. Mrs. Whitmore orchestrated opportunities for Clarissa to display her accomplishments. The drawing room became a stage where her daughter performed piece after piece on the piano. Mabel, delivering fresh tea, caught sight of Peter seated near the window. He applauded politely after each performance, but his gaze kept drifting to the rain-soaked gardens. There was a restlessness in him, a sense of being trapped by social obligation. "You play very well, Miss Whitmore," Peter said with genuine kindness after one piece. "Your dedication to practice is evident." Mrs. Whitmore beamed. "Perhaps you would care to hear her sing. Her voice is quite remarkable." "Another time, perhaps," Peter said, rising. "If you will excuse me, I find myself in need of a book." "Might I impose upon your library, Lord Whitmore?" "By all means, though I fear our collection is modest compared to what you must have at Ravenshire." "Modest collections often contain unexpected treasures," Peter replied, already moving toward the door. Mabel felt a flutter of panic. The library was her sanctuary, the one place where she allowed herself to exist beyond her role as servant. What if he found evidence of her presence there? She set down the teapot and slipped from the drawing room, hurrying toward the library. If she could reach it first, ensure everything was in order, perhaps he would never know that anyone else valued those books. But when she pushed open the library door, she found she was too late. Peter Caldwell stood before the bookshelves, his hand resting on a volume of Wordsworth, the very book she had been reading yesterday. And on the window seat lay a small ribbon she used to mark her place. Their eyes met across the room, and for the first time in her life, Mabel felt truly, completely seen. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The library held its breath, dust motes dancing in the rain-grey light. Mabel's heart hammered against her ribs so loudly she was certain he could hear it. "I apologize, my lord," she whispered, dropping into a curtsy. "I did not mean to intrude. I was only ensuring the room was in order." Peter closed the book gently, his expression unreadable. "And yet, you seem familiar with this particular volume." His voice held no accusation, only curiosity. Mabel's throat tightened. "I dust the shelves, my lord. One cannot help but notice the titles." A slight smile touched his lips. "One can notice titles without reading content. But this book," he held up the Wordsworth, "has been recently handled. The pages fall open naturally to certain passages. Someone has spent time with these words." Heat flooded her cheeks. She had been careless, foolish. "I meant no disrespect, my lord. I should not have presumed." "Presumed to read?" Peter stepped closer, and Mabel fought the urge to retreat. "That seems a strange thing to apologize for." "Do you enjoy poetry, miss?" He called her miss, as though she were someone worthy of courtesy. "Mabel, my lord, just Mabel." "And I," she hesitated, torn between honesty and self-preservation. "I find comfort in books. They ask nothing of me but attention." Peter's eyes, she noticed now, were the color of storm clouds, grey and deep and entirely too perceptive. "What is your position in this household, Mabel?" The direct question startled her. "I am," she paused, uncertain how to describe the strange liminal space she occupied. "I am Mrs. Whitmore's niece, my lord. I assist with household duties. A niece who works as a servant." His tone sharpened with something that might have been anger, though not directed at her. "I am a niece by blood, but not by standing," Mabel said quietly. "My mother was Lord Whitmore's sister. She died when I was born." The family took me in out of Christian duty. Understanding dawned in Peter's expression, followed by something that looked like sympathy. She could not bear his pity. "If you will excuse me, my lord, I have duties to attend to." She moved toward the door, desperate to escape. "Wait." The single word stopped her. She turned, keeping her eyes lowered. Peter held out the book of Wordsworth. "Take this. Read it properly, in comfort, not stolen moments between chores." "I could not, my lord, if Mrs. Whitmore discovered it." "Then we shall not tell Mrs. Whitmore." He placed the volume in her hands, his fingers brushing hers for the briefest moment. The touch sent a shock through her entire body. "Everyone deserves beauty in their life, Mabel, even those whom the world treats unjustly." Before she could respond, voices echoed in the hallway, Mrs. Whitmore calling for Clarissa. Peter stepped back, creating proper distance. "Go," he said softly, "but keep the book." Mabel fled, clutching Wordsworth to her chest like a forbidden treasure. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Mabel moved through her duties mechanically, her mind replaying every word, every gesture. He had seen her, not as a servant, not as a burden, but as a person who loved poetry and deserved kindness. It was dangerous, so very dangerous. That evening, the household gathered for a formal dinner. Mabel helped in the kitchen, preparing dishes she would never taste, arranging food on plates for people who would never see her hands. Mrs. Henderson supervised with her usual efficiency, barking orders while stirring sauces. "Lord Ravenshire seems a pleasant gentleman," the housekeeper observed, sliding roasted pheasant onto serving platters, "not like some of the pompous lords who visit. He thanked me earlier for the fresh linens. Can you imagine? An earl thanking me." Mabel said nothing, but her heart beat faster at the mention of his name. The dinner service went smoothly until the final course. As Mabel carried a tray of crystal glasses through the servants' corridor, her foot caught on an uneven stone. She stumbled, catching herself against the wall, but one glass tumbled to the floor and shattered. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the narrow space. Mabel knelt immediately, gathering shards with trembling hands. Mrs. Whitmore would be furious. Crystal was expensive, irreplaceable. This would be added to the long list of Mabel's inadequacies and failures. "Let me help." She looked up to find Peter standing in the corridor, his evening coat immaculate, his expression concerned. "My lord, you should not be here. This is not appropriate." "Neither is leaving you to clean broken glass alone," he replied, kneeling beside her despite the certain ruin to his fine trousers. "Be careful. You are bleeding." Mabel glanced down at her hand. A thin line of red traced across her palm where a shard had cut her. She had not even felt it. Peter produced a handkerchief, pristine white linen with his monogram embroidered in silver thread. He took her hand gently, wrapping the cloth around her palm with surprising tenderness. "Why are you wandering the servants' corridors, my lord? The dinner party is in the other direction." "I needed air," Peter said, still holding her hand. The conversation had turned to the merits of various hunting dogs. I confess I found myself thinking of more interesting topics, such as whether a certain reader of poetry had managed to find time to enjoy her gift. Mabel's breath caught. "I hid it beneath my mattress, my lord. It is the safest place I could think of." "You should not have to hide books like contraband," he said quietly. "You should not have to hide your intelligence, your love of learning, your very self. The world is not so kind, my lord. We cannot all choose our circumstances." "No," Peter agreed, his thumb tracing small circles on her wrist, just above the handkerchief. "But perhaps we can choose how we respond to them. Perhaps we can choose to see injustice and refuse to accept it as inevitable." "You speak as a diplomat," Mabel whispered. "You negotiate peace between nations, but some battles cannot be won with words." "I have found," Peter said, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her dizzy, "that the most important battles are often the ones fought quietly, in moments no one else sees. Small acts of rebellion against cruelty, small gestures of dignity in the face of shame. Why do you care, my lord? I am no one. Nothing." His grip on her hand tightened. "You are someone to me." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither dared to name. In the distance, laughter echoed from the dining room. The world continued, oblivious to this moment in a darkened corridor. Peter released her hand slowly, carefully, as though letting go of something precious. "Return to your duties, Mabel. But know this, I see you, and I do not accept the world's judgment of your worth." He stood, brushing dust from his trousers, and disappeared back toward the dining room. Mabel remained kneeling among the broken crystal, her hand wrapped in the handkerchief of an earl, her heart beating a rhythm she did not recognize. That night, alone in her small room, Mabel unwrapped the handkerchief carefully. The bleeding had stopped, leaving only a thin red line. She touched the embroidered monogram, P.C. Peter Caldwell. She should wash it and return it. That would be proper. Instead, she folded it carefully and placed it in the small box where she kept her few treasures. A button from her mother's dress, a dried flower from the garden, a scrap of lace she had found as a child, and now a handkerchief from a man who saw her. She pulled the Wordsworth from beneath her mattress and opened it to a marked passage. The words seemed different now, charged with new meaning. "My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky." Her heart was leaping. Dangerous, foolish, impossible leaping. But for the first time in her life, Mabel did not try to make it stop. Morning arrived with unexpected sunshine, the rain-soaked earth steaming as warmth returned to the countryside. Mrs. Whitmore seized the opportunity immediately, declaring that a stroll through the gardens would be the perfect setting for Clarissa to display her grace and charm. Mabel watched from the scullery window as preparations began. Clarissa emerged in a gown of primrose yellow, a parasol in hand, looking every inch the perfect lady. Mrs. Whitmore fussed with her daughter's curls, positioning her artfully near the entrance where the Earl would see her first. The trap was set with precision. Peter appeared shortly after breakfast, dressed for walking in buff-colored trousers and a dark green coat that made his eyes seem even more striking. Mrs. Whitmore materialized as if by magic, Clarissa at her side. "What a lovely morning, my lord," Mrs. Whitmore purred. "Clarissa was just saying how much she enjoys walking the gardens. Perhaps you would care to join her? I have some correspondence to attend to, but she knows every path and flower." Peter's hesitation was brief but visible. "That would be pleasant, Miss Whitmore, shall we?" Clarissa took his offered arm, triumph lighting her features. They set off down the gravel path, Mrs. Whitmore watching with satisfaction before disappearing into the house. Mabel should have returned to her work, should have forgotten the entire scene. Instead, she found herself drawn to the rose garden, the one place where she could work outdoors without reproach. The roses needed tending after the rain, deadheading the spent blooms, checking for disease, ensuring beauty continued. It was work she loved, one of the few tasks that felt like gift rather than punishment. She gathered her basket and shears, tied an apron over her grey dress, and made her way to the terraced beds where roses climbed ancient stone walls. The scent enveloped her immediately. Deep crimson blooms heavy with rain, pale pink buds just beginning to open, white roses pure as first snow. Mabel worked methodically, her hands gentle as she removed faded petals and trimmed errant stems. She spoke to the plants softly, a habit from childhood. "There now, you shall bloom again. And you, my lovely, you need more sunlight. We shall see what can be done." She was so absorbed in her work that she did not hear footsteps approaching on the path. "You have a gift with them." Mabel spun around, nearly dropping her shears. Peter stood at the garden entrance alone. No Clarissa, no parasol, no chaperone, just him, watching her with that same intense focus he had given her in the library. "My lord," she breathed, glancing around frantically. "You should not be here. If Mrs. Whitmore sees you speaking with me." "Miss Whitmore encountered an old friend near the reflecting pool," Peter said calmly. "They are deep in conversation about the upcoming assembly in the village. I excused myself to explore further." He stepped closer, his eyes on the roses rather than her face. "These are remarkable. I have rarely seen blooms so healthy and vibrant." "They require attention," Mabel said, returning to her work with shaking hands. "Daily care, patience, love even." "Love?" She felt heat rise to her cheeks but continued pruning. "Plants respond to how they are treated, my lord. Neglect them, and they wither. Tend them with care, speak to them kindly, and they flourish beyond expectation. You speak to them? Mabel met his eyes, expecting mockery. She found only genuine curiosity. Sometimes. It sounds foolish, I know. Not foolish at all, Peter said softly. It sounds like someone who understands that all living things need more than just water and soil to thrive. He reached out, touching a deep red bloom with careful fingers. What is this variety? Tuscany Superb. Mabel moved closer, forgetting propriety in her enthusiasm. It is one of the oldest varieties. The color is so dark it appears almost black in certain light. And the fragrance. She cupped a bloom gently, bringing it toward him. It is unlike any other. Peter leaned in, his face inches from hers as they both bent toward the flower. She could feel the warmth of his breath, smell the faint scent of sandalwood and something uniquely him. His eyes lifted from the rose to her face. You are right, he murmured. Unlike any other. They were standing too close. Any servant glancing from a window would see. Any member of the family discovering them would cause scandal. But neither moved away. Tell me about these, Peter said, gesturing to the pale pink climbers scaling the wall. What makes them special? Mabel's voice trembled slightly as she spoke. These are new-dawn roses. They bloom repeatedly throughout the season, each flower perfect in its own way. They are resilient, my lord. They survive harsh winters and hot summers. They adapt and continue to grow, to reach upward, no matter the circumstances. Rather like their caretaker, Peter observed. Mabel's hands stilled on the stems. I am no rose, my lord. I am more like the thorns. Sharp, easily overlooked, designed only to protect the beautiful things. Peter caught her hand, stopping her work. You see yourself so clearly and yet not at all. These thorns... He brushed his thumb across her palm, where the cut from yesterday had begun to heal. They are part of the rose. Not separate from its beauty, but essential to it. Strength and delicacy together. Protection and vulnerability. That is what makes a rose complete. Mabel's heart was racing. My lord, this is not proper. We should not be speaking this way. Then tell me to go, Peter said, his voice rough with emotion. Tell me you do not feel this connection between us. Tell me I imagine the intelligence in your eyes, the passion you hide beneath servitude, the soul that calls to mine. I cannot tell you any of those things, Mabel whispered, but what I feel does not matter. The world will never allow it to matter. The world, Peter said fiercely, is often wrong. The world calls you illegitimate and treats you as less than human. The world values birth over character, title over truth. I have spent my life navigating the world's rules, Mabel. I know them intimately, and I am tired of pretending they are just. You speak treason against your own class, my lord. I speak truth against injustice. He still held her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her wrist. In my work, I see nations destroy themselves over arbitrary distinctions. This tribe versus that. This religion versus another. This bloodline versus all others. And I have learned that the most meaningful connections transcend all such boundaries. Voices drifted from the path. Clarissa's laugh, high and bright. Mrs. Whitmore calling for her daughter. Peter released Mabel's hand quickly. She stepped back, putting proper distance between them, her eyes dropping to the ground. There you are, my lord, Mrs. Whitmore exclaimed, rounding the corner with Clarissa in tow. We feared we had lost you. I was admiring your roses, Peter said smoothly. They are extraordinary. You must have an excellent gardener. Mrs. Whitmore waved dismissively. Just one of the servants who tends them. Nothing of consequence. She turned to Mabel with cold eyes. You there. Have you finished deadheading the front beds? Not yet, Mrs. Whitmore. Then do so immediately. Stop wasting time here. Mrs. Whitmore turned her back, effectively erasing Mabel's existence. Come, my lord. Clarissa wishes to show you the ornamental lake. Peter cast one last look over his shoulder as he was led away. His eyes found Mabel's, holding for a heartbeat that stretched into eternity. In that glance, she read a promise, a rebellion, a future that seemed impossible yet suddenly, terrifyingly real. Then he was gone, his tall form disappearing down the path beside Clarissa's yellow gown. Mabel remained in the rose garden, her shears forgotten, her basket half filled with dead blooms. Her hand still tingled where he had touched her. Her heart still raced from words that should never have been spoken. She looked at the Tuscany superb roses, their dark petals almost black in the shadow. Unlike any other, he had said. He had not been speaking of flowers. A single petal fell, landing in her palm. She closed her fingers around it carefully, as though holding something sacred. Then she tucked it into her apron pocket and returned to her work. But everything had changed. The roses knew it. The garden knew it. And deep in her frightened, hopeful heart, Mabel knew it too. Some boundaries, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. Some words, once spoken, could never be unheard. Some connections, once acknowledged, could never be denied. The world would call it madness, society would call it scandal, Mrs. Whitmore would call it unforgivable presumption. But in a garden filled with roses that bloomed against all odds, Mabel allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, love could be stronger than convention. That truth could be louder than judgment. That a man who saw injustice and refused to accept it might truly mean the impossible words he had spoken. "You are someone to me." The afternoon sun climbed higher, warming the earth, coaxing new blooms to open. And in the rose garden of Whitmore Hall, among the thorns and petals, something equally inevitable was beginning to bloom. 3 days passed like a fever dream. Peter remained at Whitmore Hall, conducting his diplomatic consultations with Lord Whitmore, while Mrs. Whitmore orchestrated increasingly elaborate opportunities for Clarissa to demonstrate her suitability as a countess. Mabel watched from the shadows, her heart a battlefield of hope and despair. She saw Peter at meals, always seated far from her station. She glimpsed him in hallways, always surrounded by family. She heard his voice through closed doors, always proper and distant. But sometimes, when no one else was looking, his eyes would find hers across a room. And in those brief moments the world fell away. It could not continue. It had to end. She was being foolish, dangerous, selfish. Yet every night she fell asleep holding his handkerchief, reading Wordsworth by candlelight, allowing herself to dream impossible dreams. On the 4th evening, after a particularly tedious dinner where Clarissa had sung 3 songs and recited poetry with theatrical flair, Mabel found herself in the library arranging fresh candles. The family had retired to the drawing room for cards. The servants had mostly finished their duties. She should have returned to her room. Instead, she lingered among the books, touching their spines, seeking comfort in their silent companionship. The door opened softly. She turned, expecting Mrs. Henderson. Peter stood in the doorway, still in his evening clothes, his cravat slightly loosened as though he had been tugging at it in frustration. Their eyes met, and something in the air shifted, charged with everything unspoken between them. "I hoped I would find you here," he said quietly, closing the door behind him. "My lord, this is not wise. If anyone discovers us alone—" "Let them discover us," Peter said with sudden vehemence. "I am weary of pretense, weary of empty conversation about weather and hunting, weary of watching you serve dinner with your eyes lowered while I sit beside women who have never read a book for pleasure, never questioned their place in the world, never faced hardship with such grace." Mabel's hands trembled. "You do not know me, my lord. You see what you wish to see. Then tell me." Peter crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping close enough that she could see the storm in his grey eyes. "Tell me I am wrong. Tell me you are not intelligent, curious, passionate beneath the armor you wear. Tell me you do not feel this pull between us." "What I feel is irrelevant," Mabel whispered. "I am illegitimate, a bastard, the shameful product of my mother's sin." "Tell me," Peter repeated, his voice softening. "All of it. I want to know everything." And so, with trembling voice, Mabel told him. She spoke of her mother, Lady Catherine Ashford, the beloved sister of Lord Whitmore. Beautiful, kind, sheltered from the world's cruelty. She spoke of the tutor, a man of intelligence and charm but no fortune or title, their love affair discovered too late, her mother's exile to a distant estate, the scandal carefully concealed. "She died, bringing me into the world," Mabel continued, her voice barely audible. "The tutor disappeared, paid to vanish. And I became the family shame. Lord Whitmore insisted on taking me in, but his wife never forgave my existence. I am the constant reminder of her sister-in-law's disgrace, the evidence of sin walking through their halls. Peter's hands clenched at his sides. And they treat you as a servant. They hide you, diminish you, punish you for circumstances beyond your control. It is more than I deserve, my lord. Many illegitimate children are sent to orphanages or worse. At least I have shelter, food, access to books. You deserve so much more, Peter said fiercely. You deserve to be seen for who you are, not defined by the circumstances of your birth. You deserve respect, education, freedom to pursue your own happiness. The world does not work that way, my lord. Not for women like me. Then the world must change. Peter stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. And perhaps it begins with one man refusing to accept injustice when he sees it. Mabel looked up at him, her heart pounding so hard she feared it might shatter. Why do you care? You could have any woman in England, ladies of title and fortune, women raised for the exact purpose of becoming a countess. Why would you risk your reputation, your standing, for someone like me? Because, Peter said, his voice rough with emotion, I have spent my entire life doing what was expected, following the rules, honoring tradition. When my brother died and I inherited the title, I accepted the burden with grace. When the Foreign Office requested my service, I complied without hesitation. When society insisted I marry, I nodded politely and made appropriate sounds. He reached out slowly, giving her time to retreat, and took her hand in his. His touch was warm, gentle, electric. But then I met you, he continued. A woman who reads Wordsworth in stolen moments. Who speaks to roses with more tenderness than most people show to humans. Who possesses more intelligence, integrity, and strength than any titled lady I have encountered. And I realized that perhaps all my adherence to rules and tradition has been cowardice. This is not cowardice, my lord, this is madness. Perhaps they are the same thing. Peter's thumb traced circles on her wrist, the same gesture that had undone her in the corridor. Tell me you feel nothing, Mabel. Look me in the eye and tell me this connection between us is my imagination alone. She could not. The words would not come, because it would be a lie, and she had lived in enough falsehood. I feel it, she whispered. God help me. I feel it. But feeling does not make it possible. Your world and mine cannot meet, cannot or should not. There is a difference. Both, my lord, both. Peter raised her hand slowly, his eyes never leaving hers, and pressed his lips to her palm. The kiss burned through her like flame, intimate and reverent. She gasped, her entire body awakening to sensation she had never imagined. I do not accept that, he said against her skin. I refuse to accept that birth determines worth, that convention determines happiness, that society's rules are more important than human connection. You speak of revolution, my lord. I speak of justice, Peter corrected, pulling her closer, of refusing to participate in cruelty simply because it is customary, of choosing truth over tradition. They were standing so close now that Mabel could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell sandalwood and something earthier, masculine, intoxicating. His free hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating tenderness. I should go, she breathed, even as she leaned into his touch. This cannot happen. And yet it is happening, Peter murmured. Tell me to stop, Mabel. Tell me you want nothing to do with a man who challenges everything proper. Tell me to leave you alone, and I will honor your wishes. But she could not say those words, could not deny the truth blazing between them. Instead, she did something she had never done in her entire life. She chose herself. She chose honesty. She chose possibility over safety. I cannot tell you to stop, she whispered. I cannot tell you I feel nothing. I cannot lie anymore. Peter's eyes darkened with emotion so intense it stole her breath. Then hear my truth, Mabel Ashford. I do not care about your birth. I do not care about society's judgment. I care about the woman before me. The woman who deserves to be cherished, protected, honored for exactly who she is. My lord, Peter, he corrected gently. When we are alone, call me Peter. Peter, she tested the name, feeling it shape her mouth. "This is impossible. Impossible things happen every day," he said. "Nations make peace after centuries of war. Hearts learn to hope after years of despair. Women rise above the circumstances that tried to destroy them." He drew her closer still, their bodies nearly touching, propriety abandoned. His hand slid from her face to the nape of her neck, fingers tangling in hair that had begun to escape its severe pins. "Let me be clear about my intentions," Peter said, his voice low and intense. "I am not toying with you. I am not amusing myself with forbidden attraction. I am telling you that I see a future where you are not hidden in shadows but standing beside me in light." "As what? Your mistress?" Mabel forced herself to ask the cruel question. "Hidden away in some cottage while you marry appropriately." Pain flashed across Peter's face. "Never. I would never dishonor you that way. When I said standing beside me, I meant as my equal, as my partner, as my wife." The word hung between them, impossible and devastating and beautiful. "You cannot mean that," Mabel breathed. "I have never meant anything more in my life. Society will destroy you. The scandal alone could ruin your diplomatic career. Your peers will turn their backs. Your family." "Let them," Peter said fiercely. "I have lived my entire life for others' approval. Perhaps it is time I lived for truth instead." Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, voices approaching, reality crashing back. They sprang apart, Peter moving to the bookshelf, Mabel busying herself with candles. The door opened to reveal Mrs. Henderson carrying a tea tray. "Oh," the housekeeper stopped, her shrewd eyes taking in the scene. She saw too much, understood too much. "Lord Ravenshire, I did not realize you were here. Shall I bring tea?" "No need, Mrs. Henderson," Peter said smoothly. "I was merely selecting reading material. Miss Mabel was assisting me." The use of Miss, the acknowledgement of her as a person, not a servant. Mrs. Henderson caught it, her expression softening. "Of course, my lord." She set down the tray and departed, but not before giving Mabel a look that said they would speak later. Alone again, Peter turned to Mabel. "I meant every word." "I know," Mabel said, her heart in her throat. "That is what terrifies me." The next morning arrived with deceptive calm. Mabel woke before dawn, as always, but this time her heart carried a weight it had never known. Hope and terror warred within her chest. Peter's words echoed in her mind like a dangerous prayer. "As my wife." She dressed mechanically, pinning her hair with trembling fingers. Everything had changed, everything was impossible. Everything terrified her. Yet beneath the fear lived something she had never allowed herself to feel. The fragile, precious bloom of hope. The household stirred slowly. Mabel moved through her morning duties in a daze, polishing silver that already gleamed, arranging flowers that needed no arrangement. She was waiting. For what? She did not know. Peter appeared at breakfast looking tired, as though he too had spent the night wrestling with impossible thoughts. Their eyes met across the dining room for one brief moment. In that glance, she read determination, promise, a future taking shape despite all obstacles. Then Mrs. Whitmore's voice cut through the morning peace like a blade. "Clarissa, my dear, I believe Lord Ravenshire would enjoy seeing the portrait gallery this morning. Your great-grandmother was painted by Sir Joshua Reynolds. Quite a treasure." "Actually," Peter said carefully, "I had hoped to ride out this morning. Perhaps inspect the local farms, speak with tenants about their harvests." Mrs. Whitmore's smile tightened. "Surely such business can wait. The weather is perfect for indoor pursuits." Nevertheless, Peter rose from the table, his tone polite but firm. "I find I learn more about a place from its people than from its paintings. If you will excuse me." He left before Mrs. Whitmore could object further. Mabel, clearing breakfast dishes, caught the fury that flashed across her aunt's face. It was gone in an instant, replaced by calculated sweetness, but she had seen it, and it terrified her. The morning passed with agonizing slowness. Peter rode out as promised. Mrs. Whitmore closeted herself in the drawing room with Clarissa, their voices rising and falling in urgent consultation. Lord Whitmore retreated to his study, wanting no part in women's schemes. Mabel worked in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Henderson prepare the midday meal. The housekeeper kept casting concerned glances her way, but said nothing. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken understanding. It was just past noon when everything shattered. Mabel was crossing the entrance hall, carrying fresh linens, when she heard her name spoken in a voice she knew too well. She paused outside the drawing-room door, not meaning to eavesdrop, but unable to move. "The girl is a problem," Mrs. Whitmore was saying. "I have been watching the way she lingers when serving, the way he looks at her when he thinks no one notices." Clarissa's voice, uncertain. "Surely, Mamma, you are imagining things. Lord Ravenshire would never look at someone like Mabel." "Men look at anything in skirts when their baser natures are aroused," Mrs. Whitmore snapped. "And that creature has her mother's face. Catherine was beautiful too before she ruined herself. The bastard carries the same dangerous appeal." Mabel's hands tightened on the linens until her knuckles turned white. "What do you propose?" Clarissa asked, sounding worried now. "I have already written to the Sisters of Mercy in Yorkshire," Mrs. Whitmore said coldly. "They maintain a house for fallen women and unwanted relations, very remote, very strict. Mabel will be sent there within the week. By the time Lord Ravenshire realizes she is gone, if he notices at all, it will be too late to matter." "Mama, no." Clarissa's voice held genuine distress. "That is too cruel. Mabel has done nothing wrong. She exists," Mrs. Whitmore hissed. "That is wrong enough. I will not have your future destroyed by some bastard scheming. Lord Ravenshire is the best match you could hope for. I will not lose him because his attention has been caught by forbidden fruit. But to send her away like that, to a convent, it is more than she deserves." Mrs. Whitmore's voice was final, brooking no argument. "The arrangements are made. She leaves Saturday morning, and you, my daughter, will say nothing to anyone. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mamma." Mabel fled before she could hear more. She made it to the scullery before her legs gave out, sliding down the wall to sit on the cold stone floor. Her breath came in gasps, her vision blurred with tears she had not allowed herself to cry in years. Yorkshire, a convent for fallen women, prison in all but name. And Peter would never know. He would wake one morning to find her vanished, and Mrs. Whitmore would tell him some pleasant lie, that she had found employment elsewhere, that she had family in the north, that she had never been important at all. No, she could not let this happen. Not now. Not when she had finally allowed herself to hope. But what could she do? She had no money, no connections, no power. Mrs. Whitmore held all the cards. Challenging her would be useless, dangerous, potentially fatal to any chance Mabel had. Unless. The thought came quietly, desperately. Peter had given her his word, had spoken of marriage, of standing together against the world's judgment. Had he meant it, truly meant it? Or had it been beautiful words spoken in a moment of passion, easily forgotten in daylight? She had to know, had to try, because the alternative was a living death in Yorkshire, forgotten and voiceless, her spirit slowly crushed under the weight of false piety and enforced repentance for sins she had never committed. Mabel forced herself to stand. Her legs trembled but held. She made her way to the library, the one place she might find writing materials without arousing suspicion. The room was empty, silent, filled with late afternoon light. She found paper in Lord Whitmore's desk, a pen, ink. Her hands shook as she prepared to write. What did one say in such a letter? How did one ask for rescue without sounding presumptuous, without appearing to trap a man into obligation? She dipped the pen in ink and began to write, her script careful despite her trembling hands. "My lord, I write this in desperation, knowing I have no right to ask anything of you. Please forgive the liberty I take in addressing you directly. I have learned that I am to be sent away. Mrs. Whitmore has arranged for me to be taken to a convent in Yorkshire within days. It is meant as punishment and imprisonment for the crime of existing in your proximity. If the words you spoke to me in this very room were true, if you meant what you said about seeing a future beyond society's constraints, then I beg you to act quickly. I do not ask this lightly. I know the scandal it would cause. I know the cost to your reputation and standing. But I also know that if I am taken to Yorkshire, I will disappear from the world entirely. Whatever small hope we might have had will die before it can draw breath. I am afraid, my lord, more afraid than I have ever been. Not of poverty or hardship, but of losing the one chance I might have at a life of dignity and meaning. If you cannot help me, I will understand. You owe me nothing. But if you meant your words, if you truly see me as someone worth fighting for, then please, do not let them erase me. Yours in desperate hope, Mabel. She folded the letter with shaking hands, sealing it with wax from a candle. But how to deliver it? She could not simply leave it in his room. Mrs. Whitmore had eyes everywhere, servants loyal to her, watching everything. Mrs. Henderson, of course. The housekeeper had seen too much, understood too much, and more importantly, she had always been kind. Mabel found her in the linen closet, organizing sheets. The older woman took one look at her face and closed the door behind them. "What has happened, child?" Mabel told her everything in a rush of whispered words. The conversation she had overheard, the convent in Yorkshire, the letter she had written. Mrs. Henderson's face grew grave. "I suspected something like this," the housekeeper said quietly. "Mrs. Whitmore has been watching you like a hawk." She paused, then made a decision. "Give me the letter. I will ensure Lord Ravenshire receives it tonight, when the household is asleep. He takes a late walk sometimes to the library. I will leave it where only he will find it." "Thank you," Mabel breathed. "I know I ask you to risk your position." Mrs. Henderson cupped her face gently. "Your mother was kind to me when I first came to this house, the only member of the family who treated me as human. I could not save her, but perhaps I can help save her daughter. Besides," she added with a slight smile, "I'm old and tired of serving cruelty. If I lose my position helping you find happiness, it will be worth it." That evening dragged by with agonizing slowness. Mabel served dinner, watching Peter laugh politely at Lord Whitmore's stories, deflect Clarissa's attempts at charm, maintain the perfect facade of a diplomatic earl conducting routine business. But once, when passing behind his chair to refill wine glasses, his hand brushed hers. The touch was brief, could have been accidental, but she felt the question in it, the concern, the awareness that something had changed. She could not answer, could only continue her invisible dance through the dining room, silent and unseen. Later, alone in her small room, Mabel packed her few belongings into a worn canvas bag. If Peter came for her, she would need to be ready. If he did not, she would be taken to Yorkshire regardless. Either way, her time at Whitmore Hall was ending. She lay in her narrow bed, still dressed, unable to sleep. The house settled into quiet around her. Midnight chimed, then 1 o'clock, then 2. Had Mrs. Henderson delivered the letter? Had Peter received it? Would he come? Could he come? The questions chased themselves in circles until exhaustion finally claimed her. She woke to grey dawn light and the sound of carriage wheels on gravel. Her heart leapt. She rushed to the small window, pressing her face against the cold glass. But it was not Peter's carriage. It was a plain black conveyance with no crest or marking. And standing beside it, speaking with Mrs. Whitmore in the courtyard below, were 2 severe women in grey habits. The nuns had arrived early. Mabel's time had run out. Mabel's hands shook as she dressed in her plainest grey gown. Through the window she watched Mrs. Whitmore gesturing toward the house, the nuns nodding with grim satisfaction. Her aunt's face held triumph, cold and absolute. This was happening. This was real. A knock at her door made her jump. Mrs. Henderson entered without waiting for permission, her face pale but determined. "They are preparing to take you within the hour," the housekeeper said urgently. "Mrs. Whitmore claims you are unstable, prone to hysteria. She has convinced Lord Whitmore that the convent is for your own protection." "Did he receive my letter?" Mabel whispered. "Did Peter see it?" "I left it in the library as I promised. Whether he found it? Whether he can act in time?" Mrs. Henderson's voice broke. "I am so sorry, child. I tried." Mabel embraced her quickly. "You have been kinder to me than I deserved. Thank you for trying." Footsteps thundered on the servants' stairs. The door burst open. Mrs. Whitmore stood there, flanked by the 2 nuns, her expression cold as winter stone. "Come, girl. The sisters are ready to depart. Do not make this more difficult than necessary." "Please," Mabel heard herself say. "Please, I have done nothing wrong." "You have disrupted this household with your presence," Mrs. Whitmore snapped. "You have caused discord and distraction. The sisters will teach you proper humility and obedience. Perhaps years of prayer and penance will cure you of your mother's sinful inclinations." The nuns moved forward, their hands reaching for Mabel's arms. She tried to pull away, but their grips were iron, practiced in restraining unwilling charges. "No," Mabel gasped. "Please, wait. Just wait." "Enough dramatics," Mrs. Whitmore said. "Take her to the carriage." They dragged her toward the stairs. Mabel's feet scrambled for purchase on the wooden floor. She could not go quietly, could not surrender without fighting. Even if it was useless, even if Peter had never received her letter, she would not disappear without a voice. "Help!" she cried out. "Someone please help me!" "Silence yourself," one of the nuns hissed. "Such outbursts are precisely why you need spiritual correction." They were halfway down the stairs when the front doors of Whitmore Hall burst open with a crash that echoed through the entrance hall like thunder. Peter Caldwell strode in, still wearing his riding clothes, his hair windswept, his face set in an expression of absolute fury. Behind him came a portly man carrying a leather satchel, looking both nervous and official. "Release her," Peter commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Release her immediately." "Mrs." Whitmore recovered quickly, her face smoothing into false concern. "Lord Ravenshire, I apologize for the disturbance. We are simply removing a disturbed young woman to appropriate care. There is no need for your involvement." "There is every need," Peter said, moving toward the stairs where the nun still held Mabel's arms. "That woman is under my protection. You will release her now, or I will have you arrested for unlawful imprisonment." The nuns hesitated, looking to Mrs. Whitmore for guidance. Mabel's heart hammered so violently she thought it might burst from her chest. "Lord Ravenshire," Mrs. Whitmore said, her voice dripping false sweetness. "I fear you have been deceived. This girl is unstable, given to wild fantasies. She has obviously told you lies to gain your sympathy. The only lies in this house have come from you," Peter said coldly. He had reached the stairs now, his presence commanding. "Let her go." The nuns released Mabel reluctantly. She stumbled, and Peter caught her, his arm wrapping around her waist with protective strength. The touch steadied her, gave her courage. "My lord," Mrs. Whitmore's voice sharpened. "You forget yourself. This is my house, my family matter. You have no authority here." "Actually," Peter said, turning to the nervous man behind him, "I have brought precisely the authority needed. This is Magistrate William Thornbury of Brighton, and I have a proposal to make." The magistrate stepped forward, opening his satchel with trembling hands. He was clearly uncomfortable but determined. Lord Whitmore emerged from his study, drawn by the commotion, his face bewildered. "What is the meaning of this disruption?" Lord Whitmore demanded. Peter kept his arm around Mabel, holding her close. "I am here to prevent a grave injustice. You were about to send Miss Mabel Ashford to a convent against her will, to imprison her for the crime of existing. I cannot and will not allow that to happen. She is family business," Mrs. Whitmore hissed. "You have no right to interfere." "I have every right," Peter said, "because I intend to marry her." The words fell like stones into still water, ripples of shock spreading through the hall. Clarissa gasped. Lord Whitmore's face turned purple. Mrs. Whitmore looked as though she had been struck. "This is madness," Mrs. Whitmore breathed. "You cannot possibly. She is illegitimate, a bastard, a servant." "She is the woman I choose," Peter said, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. "The woman I love, the woman who will be my countess." He turned to Mabel, his eyes searching hers. "I received your letter. I came as quickly as I could. I brought the magistrate because I suspected they would try to take you before I could act." His hand cupped her face gently. "I meant every word I said to you, Mabel, every promise. If you will have me, if you will trust me, we can marry this very hour. Right here, right now, before they can separate us." Mabel's eyes filled with tears. "You would do this? Truly? Risk everything?" "I would risk anything for you," Peter said simply. "But the choice is yours. I will not force you into marriage any more than I would allow them to force you into a convent. If you wish, I will simply take you somewhere safe, help you begin a new life with no obligation to me." Mabel looked into his eyes and saw only truth, only love, only a future she had never dared to dream possible. "Yes," she whispered, "yes, I will marry you." Peter's face blazed with joy. He turned to the magistrate. "Proceed." "This is illegal," Mrs. Whitmore shrieked. "She is not of age. She needs permission." "Miss Ashford is 22 years old," the magistrate said nervously, consulting his papers, "well past the age of consent. And Lord Ravenshire, as Earl of Ravenshire, has the authority to marry without seeking permission from anyone. There is nothing illegal about this union." "I forbid it," Mrs. Whitmore cried. "I absolutely forbid it." "You have no authority to forbid anything," Peter said coldly. "Miss Ashford is not your property. She is a free woman, making her own choice." He led Mabel to the center of the entrance hall, positioning them before the magistrate. The household servants had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Henderson stood at the back, tears streaming down her face, her expression joyful. Magistrate Thornbury opened his book with shaking hands. "We are gathered here, witnesses to this union, between Peter Caldwell, Earl of Ravenshire, and Miss Mabel Ashford. Do you, Peter Caldwell, take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Peter said, his voice strong and clear, his eyes never leaving Mabel's face. "And do you, Mabel Ashford, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Mabel's voice trembled but held. "I do. Then by the power vested in me by the crown, I pronounce you husband and wife." The magistrate closed his book. "May God bless this union." Peter drew Mabel close and kissed her. Not the chaste kiss of propriety, but something deeper, more passionate, a seal on promises made and futures claimed. Mabel felt the world shift beneath her feet, reality reorganizing itself around this impossible, beautiful truth. She was married, to an earl, to a man who had defied society to claim her. When they separated, Peter kept his arm around her waist, turning to face the shocked assembly. "Let me be absolutely clear," he said, his voice carrying through the hall. "Mabel is now the Countess of Ravenshire. She will be treated with the respect and honor that title demands. Anyone who attempts to harm her, slander her, or treat her as anything less than my equal will answer to me." Mrs. Whitmore's face had gone white as parchment. "You have destroyed yourself," she whispered. "Society will never accept this. You will be ruined." "Perhaps," Peter said calmly. "Or perhaps society will learn that love and integrity matter more than bloodlines and convention. Regardless, I am content with my choice." He looked at Lord Whitmore, who stood frozen in shock. "I will arrange for Mabel's belongings to be collected. We leave for Ravenshire immediately." But Lord Whitmore found his voice. "You realize what you have done, the scandal this will cause?" "I realize exactly what I have done," Peter replied. "I have married the most remarkable woman I have ever met. I have chosen happiness over convention, and I have refused to be complicit in cruelty. If that constitutes scandal, so be it." He turned to Mabel, his expression softening. "Are you ready to leave this place, my lady?" "My lady." The words were unreal, impossible, beautiful. "Yes," Mabel said. "I am ready." They walked toward the doors together, husband and wife, Earl and Countess. Behind them, the household remained frozen in shock. Mrs. Whitmore's carefully constructed plans lay in ruins. Clarissa wept into her handkerchief. Lord Whitmore looked like a man watching the world he knew crumble before his eyes. But Mabel felt only freedom, only joy, only the strength of Peter's hand holding hers as they stepped into morning sunlight. His carriage waited in the courtyard. He helped her inside with exquisite care, then climbed in beside her. As the carriage began to move, pulling away from Whitmore Hall forever, Peter took both her hands in his. "Are you well? Did they hurt you?" "I am well," Mabel said, still hardly believing any of this was real. "You came. You actually came." "I gave you my word," Peter said gently, "and I always keep my promises." He smiled, joy breaking across his face like sunrise. "Besides, I could hardly allow them to imprison my future wife in a Yorkshire convent. What would people say?" Mabel laughed, the sound strange and wonderful. "They will say many things, my lord, none of them kind." Then let them talk, Peter said, drawing her close. We will be too busy being happy to care. The journey to Ravenshire took most of the day. Mabel sat beside Peter in the carriage, her hand clasped in his, watching the countryside roll past in a blur of green fields and ancient hedgerows. Every mile took her further from the only life she had known. Every mile brought her closer to an impossible future. She was a countess now. The thought seemed absurd, unreal, like something from the novels she had read in stolen moments. You are very quiet, Peter observed gently. Are you afraid? Mabel turned to him, this man who had upended his entire world for her. Terrified, she admitted. I do not know how to be what you need me to be. Peter lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with tender reverence. I need you to be exactly who you are. Nothing more, nothing less. The woman who reads Wordsworth and speaks to roses. The woman who faces injustice with dignity. That is who I married, Mabel. That is who I love. The word love hung between them, spoken aloud for the first time. Mabel felt tears prick her eyes. I do not deserve you, she whispered. Nonsense, Peter said firmly. If anything, I do not deserve you. You have survived cruelty that would have broken most people. You have maintained your kindness, your intelligence, your capacity for joy, despite every attempt to crush your spirit. That is extraordinary, Mabel. That is why I chose you. As the sun began to set, Ravenshire appeared on the horizon. The estate was magnificent. Stone walls centuries old, windows that caught the dying light like captured fire, gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was beautiful and ancient and completely overwhelming. Welcome home, my lady, Peter said softly. The carriage rolled up the long drive. Servants lined the steps, their faces curious but carefully neutral. Peter helped Mabel down, his hand at her waist steady and reassuring. An older woman stepped forward, her expression kind. She wore the keys of a housekeeper at her belt. My lord, welcome back. We received your message that you would be bringing your bride. Mrs. Davies, Peter said warmly, may I present Lady Mabel Caldwell, Countess of Ravenshire, my wife. The housekeeper's eyes widened slightly, but she curtsied deeply. My lady, welcome to Ravenshire. We are honored by your presence. Mabel found her voice, though it trembled. Thank you, Mrs. Davies. I hope we shall work well together. The other servants exchanged glances. A countess who spoke to them directly, with courtesy. This was unusual indeed. Peter led Mabel inside. The entrance hall took her breath away. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, portraits of ancestors watching from the walls. It was beautiful and intimidating in equal measure. I know it is overwhelming, Peter murmured. But this is your home now. Everything here is yours as much as mine. He guided her through hallways lined with art and history, up a grand staircase to a suite of rooms on the second floor. He opened the door to reveal a sitting room, decorated in soft blues and creams, elegant without being ostentatious. These are your private chambers, Peter explained. Through that door is your bedroom and dressing room. My rooms connect through the adjoining door, but it locks from your side. You control when and whether I may enter. Mabel looked at him in surprise. Most husbands would not offer such courtesy. I meant what I said, Mabel. You are my equal, not my property. This marriage may have been sudden, but I will not force intimacy before you are ready. And if I am ready, the words escaped before she could stop them, heat flooding her cheeks. Peter's eyes darkened with desire, carefully restrained. Then we will take our time. We will do this properly, with tenderness and respect. You deserve to feel cherished, not rushed. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Davies entered with two young maids carrying a trunk. Your belongings, my lady, and I have prepared a bath. The journey was long, and I thought you might wish to refresh yourself before dinner. That sounds wonderful, Mabel said gratefully. Dinner will be served in 1 hour, Mrs. Davies continued, in the private dining room, unless you prefer formality. Private would be lovely, Peter said. Thank you, Mrs. Davies. When the servants departed, Peter turned to Mabel. I will leave you to bathe and rest. Take your time. There is no rush for anything tonight. He kissed her forehead gently, a gesture of affection without demand, and retreated through the adjoining door. Alone, Mabel explored her new rooms. Everything was beautiful, expensive, chosen with taste and care. The bed was enormous, draped in silk hangings. The dressing room held gowns she had never ordered, clearly purchased in haste for her arrival. The bath was pure luxury, hot water scented with lavender, soft towels, soap that smelled of roses. Mabel sank into the warmth and allowed herself, for the first time all day, to simply feel. She was safe. She was married. She was a countess. And tonight, she would share a bed with the man who had saved her. The thought sent shivers through her that had nothing to do with fear. Dinner was intimate, just the two of them at a small table by a fire. Peter had changed into evening clothes that emphasized his broad shoulders and strong form. Mabel wore one of the new gowns, a deep green silk that made her feel beautiful for the first time in her life. They talked as they ate. Peter told her about Ravenshire, its history, the tenants who lived on the land. He asked her opinion on estate matters, genuinely interested in her thoughts. He made her laugh with stories from his diplomatic work, and slowly the tension between them shifted from nervousness to anticipation. When the meal ended, Peter stood and offered his hand. "Walk with me?" He led her to his private study, a room lined with books and comfortable furniture. A fire crackled in the hearth. It was warm and welcoming, a room designed for thinking and reading. "I wanted to show you this," Peter said, gesturing to the bookshelves. "Everything here is yours to read. No more hiding, no more stolen moments. You can spend hours here if you wish." Mabel moved to the shelves, running her fingers over the spines. Poetry, philosophy, history, science, a treasure trove of knowledge. "Thank you," she whispered. Peter came to stand behind her, close but not touching. "There is something else I want you to understand, Mabel. You are not simply my wife. You are my partner. I value your mind, your opinions, your insights. I want to share my life with you, not simply possess you." Mabel turned to face him. They were standing very close now, his warmth radiating through the space between them. "I want to share my life with you too," she said softly. "All of it." Understanding flashed in Peter's eyes. "Are you certain?" "We can wait. There is no rush." "I have waited my entire life to feel wanted," Mabel said, her voice gaining strength. "To feel valued, to feel loved. I do not want to wait anymore." Peter cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle and reverent. "Then we will not wait, but we do this together at your pace. If at any moment you wish to stop, you need only say so." He kissed her then, soft and questioning. Mabel answered by pressing closer, her hands sliding up his chest to his shoulders. The kiss deepened, passion building between them like a tide. Peter drew back, his breathing unsteady. "Your chambers or mine?" "Yours," Mabel whispered. "I want to be in your space, surrounded by you." He led her through the adjoining door to his bedroom. It was masculine but not cold, dominated by a large bed with dark blue hangings. Candles had been lit, casting warm, flickering light. Peter turned to her, his hands framing her face. "You are so beautiful, Mabel. Not just your face, though you are lovely, but your spirit, your strength, your heart. All of you is beautiful to me." His fingers found the buttons at the back of her dress, moving slowly, giving her time to object. Mabel stood still, her heart racing, as he unfastened each one with careful attention. The dress slipped from her shoulders, pooling at her feet. She wore only her chemise now, thin cotton that left little to imagination. Peter's eyes darkened with desire, but his touch remained gentle as he traced the line of her collarbone. "Your turn," Mabel said, surprising herself with her boldness. Peter smiled and began removing his coat, his waistcoat, his cravat. Mabel helped with trembling fingers, learning the feel of him, the warmth of his skin through his shirt. When he stood before her, in just his trousers and open shirt, she placed her palm over his heart. It beat as rapidly as her own. "I am nervous," she admitted. "So am I," Peter confessed. "I want this to be right for you. I want you to feel cherished." He lifted her gently, carrying her to the bed and laying her down with exquisite care. Then he joined her, his body alongside hers, propping himself on one elbow to look at her. "Tell me what you want," he murmured, his hand trailing down her arm. "Tell me what feels good." He kissed her again, deeper now, his tongue exploring her mouth as his hand slid to her waist, her hip. Mabel gasped at the sensation, her body awakening to pleasure she had never imagined. Peter took his time, learning her with patient devotion. His lips traced her throat, her shoulder. His hands discovered curves and hollows, drawing sounds from her she did not know she could make. When he finally removed her chemise, she felt no shame, only desire, only need, only trust. "You are certain?" Peter asked one more time, his body taut with restrained passion. "Yes," Mabel breathed. "Please, Peter, I want all of you." He positioned himself above her, his weight supported on his arms, his eyes holding hers. "I love you, Mabel, now and always." Then he joined with her, moving slowly, carefully, watching her face for any sign of discomfort. There was a moment of sharp pain that made her gasp, but Peter stilled immediately, giving her time to adjust. "Are you well? Should I stop?" "No," Mabel whispered, wrapping her arms around him. "Do not stop. Please do not stop." They moved together, finding a rhythm as old as time. Peter whispered words of love and praise against her skin. Mabel discovered pleasure building inside her like a wave, cresting higher and higher until it broke in a rush of sensation that left her breathless and trembling. Peter followed moments later, his body shuddering as he gasped her name like a prayer. Afterward, they lay tangled together, their breathing gradually slowing. Peter pulled the covers over them, tucking Mabel against his chest, his arms wrapped around her protectively. "Are you well?" he murmured into her hair. "Did I hurt you?" "I am more than well," Mabel said, her voice filled with wonder. "I am happy. Truly, completely happy." Peter kissed the top of her head. "As am I, my love. As am I." They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms, the Countess of Ravenshire finally safe, finally home, finally loved. 6 months had passed since the morning Mabel became a countess. 6 months of learning to walk through the world with her head held high. 6 months of discovering that happiness was not a fleeting dream, but something that could be built, day by day, with love and purpose. Ravenshire had become home in ways Whitmore Hall never could have been. Mabel walked its halls freely, spoke her mind openly, spent hours in the library pursuing knowledge that had once been forbidden. The servants treated her with genuine respect, not the grudging tolerance she had known before. And Peter. Peter loved her with a constancy that still took her breath away. He consulted her on estate matters, valued her opinions, encouraged her to develop her own interests and pursuits. At night, they came together with passion that deepened rather than faded, learning each other's bodies and souls with patient devotion. But there remained one shadow on her happiness, one unresolved wound that would not fully heal. Whitmore Hall. Mrs. Whitmore. The past that still had power to hurt when she allowed herself to remember. It was Peter who finally broached the subject one evening as they sat together in the study, her head resting on his shoulder while he read diplomatic correspondence. "You have been quiet all day," he observed. "What troubles you, my love?" Mabel hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I was thinking about my aunt, about Clarissa. I know I should simply forget them, move forward, but I find I cannot." Peter set aside his papers, giving her his full attention. "What do you wish you could do?" Mabel considered the question carefully. "I think I wish to forgive them, not because they deserve it, but because I deserve to be free of the anger, the bitterness. I do not want to carry that weight anymore." "Then we shall arrange it," Peter said simply. "We will invite them here, on your terms. You will face them as the Countess of Ravenshire, with all the power and dignity that title confers. And if they refuse to come, then at least you will have tried. But I suspect curiosity alone will bring them." The invitation was sent the following day, formal, courteous, impossible to refuse without obvious rudeness. Lord and Lady Whitmore, along with Miss Clarissa Whitmore, were cordially invited to spend a week at Ravenshire as guests of the Earl and Countess. The response came within days. They would attend. Mabel spent the week before their arrival in a state of nervous anticipation. Peter remained steady beside her, reminding her constantly of her worth, her strength, her right to exist in this world without shame. When the day finally came, Mabel, dressed with care in a gown of deep burgundy silk, her hair arranged elegantly by her lady's maid. She looked every inch a countess. More importantly, she felt like one. The Whitmore carriage arrived precisely at noon. Mabel stood beside Peter at the entrance, her hand resting on his arm, drawing courage from his solid presence. Lord Whitmore descended first, his face carefully neutral. Mrs. Whitmore followed, her expression cold and assessing, and finally Clarissa, who looked pale and uncertain. "Lord Whitmore, Lady Whitmore, Miss Whitmore," Peter said formally. "Welcome to Ravenshire." Mrs. Whitmore's eyes swept over Mabel, taking in the expensive gown, the confident posture, the transformation from servant to lady. Her lips tightened with displeasure, barely concealed. "Thank you for your hospitality," Lord Whitmore said stiffly. "It is generous of you to receive us after our unfortunate circumstances of your departure." "I prefer to think of them as fortunate circumstances," Peter replied smoothly. "They brought me my wife, after all." Mrs. Davies appeared to show them to their rooms. As they disappeared inside, Clarissa cast one last look over her shoulder at Mabel. In that glance, Mabel read something unexpected. Not hatred or disdain, but confusion, and perhaps the first stirrings of respect. The first dinner was awkward, conversation stilted and formal. Mrs. Whitmore made barbed comments disguised as pleasantries. Lord Whitmore discussed politics with Peter while studiously ignoring Mabel. Clarissa picked at her food and said almost nothing, but Mabel held her composure. She engaged in conversation when addressed, offered her opinions when asked, and refused to shrink back into the invisible girl she had once been. Over the following days, something slowly shifted. Mrs. Whitmore's coldness began to crack when she witnessed the respect with which the Ravenshire servants treated their mistress. Lord Whitmore's indifference softened when he heard Mabel discussing estate management with intelligence and insight. And Clarissa began seeking Mabel out, tentatively at first, then with increasing frequency. It was on the third day that Clarissa found Mabel in the rose garden, tending the beds that had been planted under her direction. The younger woman stood at the entrance, uncertain. "May I join you?" Clarissa asked quietly. "Of course," Mabel replied, surprised. She gestured to a stone bench. "Please, sit." Clarissa settled beside her, watching as Mabel, dead-headed, spent blooms with practiced care. "You really love them, do not you?" "The roses, I do. They taught me that beautiful things can grow even in difficult soil, if tended with patience and care." Clarissa was silent for a long moment. "I owe you an apology," she finally said, "for my silence, for my complicity. I should have spoken against what Mama planned to do to you. I should have defended you." Mabel set down her shears, giving Clarissa her full attention. "You were in a difficult position. Your mother's influence is considerable." "That is no excuse," Clarissa said, tears welling in her eyes. "I was a coward. I let fear of Mama's displeasure keep me silent while you suffered. And the truth is," she took a shaky breath, "I was also jealous. Jealous. Of your freedom," Clarissa explained. "Your ability to read what you wished, think what you wished, be who you truly were, even when everyone tried to make you small. I had everything you lacked, all the privileges of legitimacy and position, and yet I felt trapped in a cage of expectations. You were more free in servitude than I was in privilege." Mabel reached out, taking Clarissa's hand. "We were both prisoners, just in different ways. Your mother's ambitions confined you as surely as her cruelty confined me. What you did, marrying Lord Ravenshire, defying everything society said you could not have," Clarissa wiped at her tears. "It made me realize I have been living my life for Mama's approval, rather than my own happiness, and I do not even know what my own happiness looks like." "Then perhaps it is time to discover it," Mabel said gently. "You are young, Clarissa. You have time to choose your own path. How did you find the courage?" "I did not feel courageous," Mabel admitted. "I felt terrified. But I also knew that a life lived in fear was no life at all, and I had someone who believed I was worth fighting for. That made all the difference." The two women sat together in the rose garden, separated by years of inequality and hurt, but finding in that moment a tentative connection. Not quite friendship yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. That evening, Peter suggested a private meeting with Lord and Lady Whitmore in the study. Mabel agreed, though her stomach twisted with anxiety. They gathered after dinner, the four of them, in the book-lined room. Mrs. Whitmore's face was set in rigid lines. Lord Whitmore looked uncomfortable but resigned. Peter spoke first, his voice calm but firm. "We asked you here for a specific purpose. My wife wishes to address the past before we can all move forward." Mabel found her voice, drawing strength from Peter's hand holding hers. "I spent 22 years in your household believing I deserved nothing, believing I was less than human because of the circumstances of my birth. You reinforced that belief at every opportunity, Aunt Eleanor. You punished me for existing." Mrs. Whitmore opened her mouth to protest, but Mabel held up a hand. "Please let me finish. I am not asking for an apology. I know I will not receive one. But I want you to understand something. Your cruelty did not destroy me. It taught me resilience. Your attempts to make me invisible taught me to see my own worth even when no one else did. Your rejection taught me the value of true acceptance." She stood, moving to face her aunt directly. "I forgive you, Mrs. Whitmore. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. I release you from any power you still hold over my heart. You cannot hurt me anymore." Mrs. Whitmore's face worked through a series of emotions: anger, shock, and finally something that might have been shame. She said nothing, but her rigid posture softened slightly. Lord Whitmore cleared his throat. "Your mother was my sister, Mabel. I failed her when she needed protection, and I failed you by allowing my wife's treatment to continue unchecked. For that I am sorry." The apology, unexpected and genuine, brought tears to Mabel's eyes. "Thank you, Uncle. That means more than you know." Peter stood beside her, his presence a reminder of the life she had built beyond their cruelty. "Mabel is an extraordinary woman. She has brought intelligence, compassion and grace to Ravenshire. The tenants already love her. My colleagues in government speak of her with respect. She is everything a countess should be and more." Mrs. Whitmore finally spoke, her voice strained. "Society will never fully accept this match. There will always be whispers about her birth." "Let them whisper," Peter said firmly. "We do not require society's approval to be happy. But I will not tolerate slander against my wife. Anyone who insults her insults me." The meeting ended shortly after, tension released if not fully resolved. As the Whitmores retired to their rooms, Clarissa paused at the door. "Thank you," she said quietly to Mabel, "for showing me what courage looks like." The final days of the visit passed more easily. Mrs. Whitmore remained cold, but no longer openly hostile. Lord Whitmore engaged Mabel in conversation, asking her opinion on matters he would never have considered her qualified to address before. And Clarissa began to bloom, speaking her own mind more freely, questioning her mother's rigid expectations. On the morning of their departure, as carriages were loaded, Clarissa embraced Mabel impulsively. "I want to be brave like you," she whispered. "I want to choose my own happiness." "Then do it," Mabel encouraged. "It will be frightening, but you are stronger than you know." As the carriages rolled away down the long drive, Peter wrapped his arms around Mabel from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free," Mabel said simply. Finally, completely free, they returned to the house together, ready to continue building the life they had chosen. A life of love, purpose, and dignity. A life where the past no longer had power to define the future. Mabel had been the bastard niece, the invisible servant, the shameful secret. But she had become so much more. She had become herself fully and unapologetically. And in doing so, she had discovered that forgiveness was not about excusing cruelty, but about refusing to let it continue destroying joy. She was the Countess of Ravenshire. But more importantly, she was simply Mabel, and that was enough. 25 years had transformed Ravenshire from an estate into a legacy. The morning sun cast golden light across gardens that had grown more beautiful with time, tended by hands that knew both patience and love. Mabel stood at the window of the library, now expanded to twice its original size, watching preparations in the courtyard below. Servants moved with purpose but also with smiles, genuine affection evident in every gesture. Today marked a quarter century since an impossible marriage had shocked society and changed two lives forever. "You are wool gathering again?" Peter's voice came from behind her, warm with affection and familiarity. She turned to find her husband, grayer now but still commanding, still the man who had seen her when she was invisible. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her waist, a gesture as natural as breathing after 25 years of marriage. "I was remembering," Mabel said, leaning into his embrace, "that frightened girl who thought she deserved nothing, who believed happiness was for other people. And look at you now," Peter murmured against her hair, "the most respected countess in 3 counties. A woman who has changed more lives than she knows." It was true, though Mabel still found it difficult to accept. The years had been kind, filled with purpose and meaning she had never imagined possible. She had established a school on the estate for children, regardless of their birth or station. Legitimate and illegitimate learned side by side, a revolutionary concept that had drawn both praise and criticism. But the results spoke for themselves. Young people who might have remained trapped in poverty now had knowledge, skills, opportunities. She had opened the Ravenshire Library to the public one afternoon each week, believing passionately that books should not be the privilege of the wealthy alone. Farmers and servants sat beside merchants and minor gentry, all pursuing learning for its own sake, and she had quietly, without fanfare, helped dozens of young women escape situations similar to her own. Girls born to shame, treated as burdens, offered nothing but cruelty. Through careful networks and generous funding, she had given them choices, education, apprenticeships, dowries for respectable marriages, freedom. The scandal of her own marriage had faded over the years, replaced by respect for the work she accomplished and the grace with which she carried her title. Society had learned what Peter already knew. That worth was not determined by birth, but by character, compassion, and courage. The door burst open and their daughter swept in, all energy and laughter. Catherine, named for the grandmother she would never meet, had inherited Mabel's intelligence and Peter's confidence. At 22, she was everything her mother had been denied: educated, valued, free. "Mama, Papa, the guests are beginning to arrive. Aunt Clarissa is already here with her husband and children." Clarissa. The transformation of that relationship remained one of Mabel's greatest joys. After leaving Whitmore Hall, Clarissa had found her own courage. She had refused the advantageous matches her mother arranged and instead married a country doctor, a man of modest means but considerable kindness, who loved her for herself rather than her connections. They had built a life of quiet happiness, raising 4 children and serving their community. And Clarissa had become Mabel's closest friend, the sister she had never had, bound not by blood but by mutual respect and shared understanding of what it meant to choose one's own path. Mrs. Whitmore had never fully reconciled herself to either marriage. She had died 5 years ago, bitter to the end. But Lord Whitmore had softened considerably in his final years, spending time with his grandchildren regardless of which daughter had borne them, finally seeing people rather than pedigrees. "We should go down," Peter said, offering Mabel his arm. "Our guests await the guests of honor." They descended the grand staircase together, a couple so attuned to each other that they moved as one. The ballroom had been opened for the occasion, decorated with roses from the garden that Mabel had expanded over the years. Tuscany superb still bloomed in profusion, dark petals almost black, their fragrance filling the air with memories. The guests were a testament to the life they had built: diplomats and farmers, scholars and tradesmen, titled ladies and former servants who had found better lives through Mabel's intervention. All gathered to celebrate a marriage that should never have happened but had become legendary. Clarissa embraced Mabel warmly, her face alight with genuine joy. 25 years. Can you believe it? You have been married longer than I have known my own husband. And every year better than the last, Mabel said, squeezing her hand. The celebration continued through the afternoon. Toasts were made, stories shared, laughter echoing off ancient walls. Peter and Mabel danced together as they had on their wedding night, older now but no less connected. As evening approached, they slipped away from the crowd, seeking a moment of quiet in the rose garden. The same garden where he had first told her she was unlike any other, where she had begun to believe she might deserve happiness. "Do you ever regret it?" Mabel asked, though she knew the answer. "The scandal, the disapproval, the challenges we faced?" Peter cupped her face in his hands, his touch as tender as it had been 25 years ago. "Not for a single moment. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You have made me a better man, Mabel. You have taught me that love is not about possession but partnership, that true nobility lies in how we treat those whom society deems unimportant." "You saved me," Mabel whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "No," Peter said firmly. "You saved yourself. You chose courage over safety. You chose truth over convention. I simply had the privilege of standing beside you while you became who you were always meant to be." They stood together as twilight descended, two people who had defied every rule and found something more valuable than approval. They had found each other. They had found purpose. They had found a love that transcended birth and status and society's narrow judgments. Inside, their daughter laughed with Clarissa's children. Former students shared how education had changed their trajectories. Women who had been rescued from desperate situations spoke of the lives they had built. This was Mabel's legacy, not the title she had never expected, not the wealth she had never sought, but the lives touched, the barriers broken, the proof that one person's courage could ripple outward in ways impossible to measure. She had been the bastard niece, invisible and voiceless. But she had become the Countess of Ravenshire, a woman who used her position to lift others, who refused to let shame and prejudice go unchallenged, who demonstrated every day that love and justice were more powerful than tradition and cruelty. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Peter drew Mabel close. "What are you thinking, my love?" Mabel smiled, her heart full to bursting. "I am thinking that once upon a time I did not believe I deserved a rainbow. But you taught me that my heart could leap. That joy was not reserved for others. That I was worthy of love and dignity and a life lived in full color rather than shades of gray." She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had changed everything. "And I am thinking how grateful I am. Not just for you, though you are my greatest blessing, but for every moment of this impossible, beautiful, hard-won life we have built together." Peter kissed her then, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 25 years of devotion and promised 25 more if fate allowed. The bastard niece had been sent away, but the woman she became had transformed not just her own life, but countless others. She had proven that love could conquer prejudice, that courage could defeat cruelty, that one person choosing to see another's worth could change the world. As they walked back toward the house, arms entwined, Mabel glanced at the roses blooming in the twilight, beautiful things growing in difficult soil, resilient, enduring, reaching always toward light. Like her, like the life she had claimed, like the love she had found when the world said she deserved nothing. England's most desired earl had claimed her as his countess. But more than that, he had claimed her as his equal, his partner, his beloved. And she had claimed him in return. Their story had shocked a nation, but it had also inspired hope in every person who had ever been told they were less than, every bastard, every servant, every invisible soul who dared to dream of more. Mabel had been sent away to be forgotten. Instead, she had become unforgettable, a symbol of strength, redemption, and the transformative power of love that sees beyond all barriers. And as the celebration continued into the night, music and laughter floating on the summer air, two people who had defied every expectation held each other close and knew with absolute certainty that they would do it all again. Every challenge, every scandal, every moment of doubt. Because what they had found together was worth any price. Love, partnership, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. The bastard niece and England's most desired earl. An impossible match that became an inevitable truth. And they lived, not just happily ever after, but purposefully ever after. Making the world better, one act of courage at a time. Sometimes the greatest love stories are not about destiny bringing two souls together, but about courage choosing connection over convention. Mabel's journey reminds us that our worth is not determined by how the world sees us, but by how we see ourselves. She could have accepted invisibility, surrendered to shame, disappeared into that Yorkshire convent without a whisper. Instead, She dared to believe she deserved more. And that single act of belief changed everything. Peter did not save Mabel. He saw her. And sometimes being truly seen is the greatest gift one person can give another. Together, they proved that love built on mutual respect, shared values, and unwavering commitment can withstand any storm society throws at it. What invisible parts of yourself have you been hiding? What would happen if you allowed yourself to be fully seen? Perhaps Mabel's story is not just about a bastard niece who became a countess, but about every person who has ever felt less than, unworthy, or forgotten. About the moment we choose to stop accepting the world's judgment and start writing our own story instead. If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe that courage can change everything, please leave a like. It helps this message reach others who need to hear it. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story that might change how you see yourself or the world. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? I love knowing that these words are traveling across distances, connecting us through the power of story. Thank you for spending this time with Mabel and Peter. May their courage inspire your own.